Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lavender. I am yet again joined by my good buddy, Eric Pond. Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. Let's turn the page on St. John's and go to Nova, baby.
We're doing as well as we can, given the situation. And, you know, we were talking about this before we got on the pod. I know the St. John's game was a rough game. I guess we should recap it. St. John's beats Marquette in Milwaukee, 70-69. Eric, we're going to get into this game. It was another slow start for Marquette. They fought their way back. You had some poor performances, relatively poor performances from some of our stars. But as I was thinking through this today and since the game, I've been trying to figure out how do we characterize this game? Is this a step back for this Marquette team? Is this just an aberration against a team that we just don't match up well against in St. John's? How are you thinking about this loss to St. John's, this 1-point loss at home?
I think more than anything else, like the first thing that has to come to mind and the first thing that you have to go to is this is a team we match up poorly against. I don't think it's a necessarily like this is a Wojo getting out X's and O's against Mullins or whatever. I don't know. I think we were behind early. We couldn't hit anything. Marcus was off. I think we have a lot of bigger questions here to dive into, like some of these slow starts that we might be seeing as a trend with this team. That said, like the D looked solid and there were some bright spots, especially stretches by Ed Morrow and Chartouni that I want to talk about a little bit too. And at the end of the game, it was a tight game that, you know, we shot poorly. We were still in the lead at the end of the game and lost to a good team. That's my takeaway.
We're going to get into it in a little bit, and I should have mentioned this at the top. We're going to get into a Villanova preview a little bit later in this pod, but obviously wanted to start with the St. John's reaction. This was an uncharacteristic performance for Marquette, and I think I would push back a little bit on your assumption, Eric, that we played good D. I think we did for stretches, and obviously if you're going to chip away at the big lead that St. John's had at halftime or even early in the second half, you have to play good defense. But what I saw early in this game for Marquette, and it was primarily through Marcus Howard, even though he got a few shots up in the first half, they looked lackadaisical. And that's a hard thing to read through a TV. I admit that. But I think coaches noticed that. Wojo kind of hinted at that in his post-game press conference, that this wasn't the crispiest performance from Marquette. And that was one of the things that jumped out to me in the first half. I thought Marcus, even though he put up some points in the first half, didn't look like his normal decisive self. I think St. John's has something to do with that, with their length. I think they can bother Marcus. It looked like they were off. Maybe some of that is the 6-day, hangover, and then they finally got into it in the second half, but it wasn't enough. They just felt off to me and weren't on their game, and you can't afford to do that even at home in the Big East.
Crispus Attucks, is that what you're looking for there, Mike?
Crispus Attucks.
Yeah, for all the 30 Rock fans or U.S. history fans out there.
U.S. history fans, that's right.
That's right. Okay. I agree. I think if you look at what we gave up, I mean, even just to Simon in the first half, he had 19 points, all coming in the first. He looked like he couldn't be stopped. I think he only missed one field goal. Mm-hmm. Our D was not stellar. I think it was good at points. I think particularly Chartouni, it was promising, talking more on a player-to-player basis. But in talking about like the team coming out flat again and that being a trend, hard to say whether that's, in fairness, as you said, a team with 6 days of rust on them, or if that's actually something troubling and reoccurring that should be concerning us. We've already seen it on multiple occasions, and I'd be willing to bet that that's something we might see again once or twice the rest of this year. I also want to point out to your kind of call to coaching Wojo's comments in post game. I also saw Wojo show up on Dan Dokic's Twitter account. Don't ask me why I follow Dokic. We here at the Real Chili Podcast definitely don't endorse that sort of follow, but Wojo appeared on the Greenberg Dokic podcast, and he said you have to get your head and your heart in the right place before you can execute. And while that's a whole lot of coach speak and sort of interview PRing in terms of languaging out a loss, I think that's actually really telling. You have to get your head and your heart in the right place before you can execute. That actually does seem to feel like in my bones sort of what was wrong with this game. We never had both of those things running at the same time in unison. We never seemed to be focused and efforting on the same level at the same time in that game as we've actually seemed to be doing all year. So maybe that's a focus, and maybe that's something he's hammered into this team. But
it wasn't there, and I think you're right. I think we should be right to acknowledge the fact that the head and the heart thing, that is coach speak to a certain degree. But look, folks, with any sport, but particularly with the sport when you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids, it's not always just about the X's and O's. As with anyone, right? You're going through things in your life, you're going through things at school, and sometimes it is hard to give 110% effort. And when you're going up a talented squad, you're going up against a talented St. John's squad, you can't afford to do that. So this is ultimately attributable to Wojo. It's his job to have the team ready to play for every game. I think as I get a little more, clarity and distance from the game, I think St. John's is a bad matchup because they can throw guards at every spot. That presents challenges for Theo John or Ed Morrow getting out to the perimeter, and that at the same time hurts our interior defense, which has been such a strength. So I think there were a lot of things at play, but I do agree, Eric. I think that not passion, but I think you got to be in the game 100%, and it just didn't feel like it last night.
I think that naturally brings up one question, and it is the classic sports question. Like, were we looking ahead to Nova and forgetting that we had to win last night first? Was this the classic trap game? And I'm not sure that that's fair to the coaching staff. I'm not sure they would let us away, like that they would really let us lose our focus in that way that significantly. Yeah. But I think it's a really fair, natural question to ask when we're on such a heater coming into this game. And we lose to St. John's right before arguably our biggest game of the year. I don't know. What do you think? Was it a trap game?
I think that's a fair question. Maybe I think it's a fair question, but I think in a different year, maybe the answer is yes. But when this is the only team in Big East play that you've lost to, and they fucking killed you by 20,
agreed,
in an embarrassing loss,
agreed.
I do think the trap game thing is a real thing, right? But that it shouldn't have been this game.
I think the answer might just be that Chris Mullen and St. John's really has our number that badly, and I think that's not necessarily again X's and O's. I think it's matchups as well, and shit. Like if they didn't beat us the first time that badly, and this wasn't 2 in a row for the sweep, right, and our only 2 losses in Big East play, I would really question the trap game thing. I don't think that's the case.
With that, we're going to wrap up the St. John's discussion. We just wanted to give you a little bit sense of how we were thinking and processing the loss to St. John's. We won't see them until at least or potentially the Big East tournament later this year. So that's it for St. John's.
Thank God.
Thank God. If Brian Henry was on this pod, we should note as a disclaimer, we were going to have a pod up for you the morning after this loss. There were some technical difficulties on our end, so we weren't able to get that up. But I do know the pod was recorded, and it was a fiery pod. So I'm sorry the world will never see that pod. Eric, I'm sure you can imagine how much fire was spit on that podcast.
Yeah, just breathing fire down the throats of all the Real Chili fanatics out in Real Chili world.
So thank you, lucky stars, folks, that we didn't subject you to that. But Eric,
it was some 5-alarm Real Chili.
Yeah. So you set up a perfect segue there in that the discussion around a trap game.
Mm-hmm.
The next game on Marquette's schedule, we've been saying it for a while, Saturday, February 9th, defending national champion comes to town. It is a 2:30 p.m. Eastern tip on the Big Fox. Ken Pomeroy predicts that this will be a 2-point win for Marquette.
Oh, baby.
They have. I haven't seen a line yet. I actually haven't checked, but they only post them like 36 hours ahead. So we haven't seen a line from Vegas yet. Is this the biggest Marquette game in – I mean, maybe excluding the NCAA tournament game against South Carolina, which, again, we got blown out in. Is this the biggest Marquette game in 3-4 years? This feels like a big game.
Yes. This is a much anticipated matchup, to say the least. So the Cats took care of business last week, going 2-0 against DePaul, the Blue Demons, and the Georgetown Hoyas. Jay Wright's squad is, as of recording tonight, they're 9-0 in the conference, 18-4 overall, with a 10-game win streak, folks. And they have that on the line tonight. I think they just tipped a half an hour ago against Creighton.
They're tied at 22 at halftime. We're just about halftime.
There you go. So it tipped about 47 minutes ago, actually. A home game at Finneran Pavilion. This is crazy. I think they're currently riding the third longest winning streak in the country, behind only Tennessee and Washington. And we would not have been far behind that with a win against St. John's.
Right.
But to say the least, like, we are facing a hot Nova team that has found their stride. Jay Wright has this team humming and really hitting on all cylinders. And it's a shame. It really is sort of a shame that we didn't come out victorious against St. John's, because this would be for the lead, or share the lead in the Big East. I guess given tiebreakers, it would be for the lead. But still, I think this is the biggest game in years, Mike. I think you're right. And so befitting. It's on National Marquette Day, which we know is a big deal. Big deal in Marquette. Big deal for the Marquette community.
It's a big game. And look, you remember this as well as anyone, Eric. The narrative around Villanova at the beginning of the season was, they don't have it anymore. That's the end of the Villanova run. Yep. They got blown out by Michigan in mid-November. They lost to Furman, my wife's alma mater. Shout out Paladins. They lost to Furman, and Villanova did in the middle of November.
OT.
And they had a couple of other losses. And people were ready to say, this isn't the Villanova that won a national championship. And I think that's a very fair statement. When you lose players like Josh Hart, you can't easily replace them. Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges,
yep.
DiVincenzo. Like, of course they were going to take some time to come back together. Is this the same caliber of Villanova team from last year? Hell no.
No.
But I still don't know, and we're going to find out. This is why this game is so big. I think until Marquette proves it on the court, Villanova is still the better team. They're the better program. They have the more proven coach. Villanova is still the class of the Big East, just because Marquette has had a great season so far and a good Big East run. We've got to prove it on the court against Villanova. We're going to get into the X's and O's, Eric, but Marquette hasn't earned anything yet. And I think Villanova, I would be shocked if they didn't come into this game with a little bit of an attitude of try and take it from us, Marquette. Because if I'm Villanova, I'm coming into Milwaukee with, they've got nothing to lose. They've got a talented team, and they're the defending national champions.
Make no mistake, folks, the Big East appears to be a pretty damn top-heavy league this year, and this is a clash of two of the best, as if you needed any motivation to tune into the game, which you shouldn't. Nova is obviously the dominant force in the Big East still. They've earned no less than a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament the last 5 seasons.
Oh my God.
I mean, they are.
What does that feel like? What does that feel like? I wish I knew what that felt like.
I mean, what does that feel like? I don't know. And that's just incredible staying power, and really a testament to the program Jay Wright's built. Like, there's a reason he's mentioned in NBA jobs. There's a reason he's mentioned in traditional, what we would call blue blood jobs. It's Belichickian-esque sort of within the history of the recent Big East, what he's been able to accomplish. I mean, it's pure dominance. And I look back to what you're saying, like on what's happened this year. I think they're 18-4. I want to say
18-4 and recognizing that they're playing a game as we're recording.
Creighton right now, right? Yeah. So as you real chilly listeners listen to this, they're going to be 19-4 or 18-5. They've lost coming into this game to Michigan, which is not a fluke. Furman and Penn, which could perhaps be a double fluke, and Kansas, which is not a fluke. I was just sort of curious. I looked at the first sort of fluky game they lost and dove into it a little bit to see what we could determine maybe from that Furman loss, knowing that, Mike, this also has a special place in your heart as the Furman Paladins are your wife's alma mater.
It is a beautiful campus, I got to say. It's a really, it's nice.
Nestled in South Carolina. What part of South Carolina is that in, Mike?
It's near Clemson, South Carolina, Greenville, Clemson, South Carolina area. Beautiful part of the world.
God's country.
That's right.
Confederate country.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. But like, what can we determine by looking at that game? It seemed like an oddball to start out the season. They lost 76-68 in overtime. But just a few takeaways. Jordan Lyons, who is only 5'11", which might sound like a familiar height to Marquette fans, because that is also the height of Marcus Howard. He led Furman in that game with 17 points. Furman also was on a stringer. They had also just beat Loyola Chicago, who was a Final Four team last year, as you might recall, in our region. And he had recently matched a Division I record with 15 three-pointers against North Greenville, which I assume is South Carolina, early in the season. Which, let's not confuse that with what Marcus Howard has done in the Big East, but it's not exactly dissimilar in terms of a shorter stature three-point dagger shooter.
I feel like you're predicting Marcus is going to have a game.
I don't want to go. I'm not putting money on it, but I'd like to say that there are similarities here.
Yeah.
I also want to point out that Furman's tallest player is listed at 6'8". I think it was senior Matt Rafferty. He had 17 rebounds in that game against Nova. Nova's two starting sort of 4-5s or true centers, they don't go above 6'8", do they, Mike?
No, they don't go. Yeah, not the starters, right? So their starters at the 4 and 5 are typically Sadiq Bey, who comes in at 6'8", and Eric Pascal, who comes in at 6'8" as well. So Nova has the flexibility to play a smaller lineup, which I think presents some problems for Marquette. I think if you're a casual college basketball fan, you probably heard about Phil Booth. You probably heard about Colin Gillespie, who played the 1 and 2 respectively for Villanova. But as I look at this, Eric, I think one of the potential problems that I see for Marquette, how are they going to defend, is that with Eric Pascal, who's at 6'8", playing at the 5, he's a shooter. He gets out to the three-point line, and he can knock it down with relative consistency. Let's see, pulling it up right here just so I have it. So he's shooting, Pascal is 36% from the 3 this season, and he doesn't hesitate to shoot. And so I think what we've seen in the past is if that 5-man on the other team pulls out and gets to the three-point line, that pulls Theo away, that pulls Ed away, that reduces the quality of our interior defense, that opens up the interior for guards like Phil Booth, for guards like Gillespie. And so that presents a problem. How the coaching staff decide to handle that is going to be a really unique situation. St. John's was able to take advantage of that exact same problem to a certain degree. So, Eric, for me, that's one of the bigger things. Do you see the same thing, or are you looking at other things in this matchup?
Mike, I see a lot of the same situation. So if you round up, Pascal actually is shooting 37% from the 3.
Sure.
Technicality, but I mean, it's wild. Like to have a big guy like that, to have their dominant force underneath, be able to be that sort of stretch 4 NBA type player. Yes, like that's why the professional league has shifted that way. That's why that creates problems. That's why that position is so attractive. Yes, it opens up and unclogs lanes. It basically brings out massive space underneath for a guy like Phil Booth to drive into. And it also makes certain that we need to have quick feet, quick closeouts, and really sort of limber guys and not lane cloggers in the game in terms of our bigs. And I don't know who that is. In an ideal situation, this is where you have a 6'8" Brendan Bailey, a 6'7" Jamal Cain, tall, long, limber guys who can get out, close out quickly. Ike Eki, but these guys, I don't think they're ready. I think Joey Hauser becomes extremely important in this situation. He can a little bit do it all. He's shown flashes of everything. He's 6'9", 230. He's shown quick feet. Sam, the same. I think Sam and Joey, like the Hauser brothers on D, are going to be massively, massively important. And unfortunately, I think that means, in terms of game plan, I assume we might have to minimize a little bit of the Ed Morrow, Theo John minutes. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying they're not capable. I'm just saying at 250, 6'9", you're not closing out as quickly as you are at 220, 6'9", which is sort of where a Joey Hauser rides. And again, I think if some of our younger forwards are ready, this is a time when you employ them, but I think we're a year off from that.
And Theo has been hesitant to leave the paint. That's where he excels, and so understandably, to draw all the way out of 3-point line.
He's a blocking specialist. That's right.
As he should be, because he's fucking awesome at it.
He's fucking amazing. Yeah, he's the best in the Big East.
He's the best in the Big East, and we love him for it. The big theology, John the Baptist.
That's right. That's right.
Side note here, I saw the Marquette Instagram account, the official Marquette Instagram account, put up a poll of what Theo's nickname should be. I'm pretty sure the Real Chili podcast put up a poll 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and we already determined that.
I believe we got Theo John's input as well. So
That's right.
That was the official Theo endorsed poll. This is not junk drawer, folks. This is real deal, Real Chili dominance. So
Theo's hesitant to leave the paint, rightly so.
Right.
But if he decides to stay in the paint and defend it, even if Pascal is pulling him out, then you're saying, all right, Pascal, you shoot 37%. We think you're going to have an off night. Good luck.
Yeah.
So Villanova presents some problems. We haven't even talked much about Phil Booth. Phil Booth is a guard kind of in the Villanova vein. He's not a Josh Hart. He's not a Jalen Brunson.
It's a good way to put it.
He's a good guard, someone that I would expect you're going to see Sakar Annam matched up against. But Eric, actually, I want to pose this question to you because we forgot to touch on this in the St. John's conversation. Mm-hmm. If there were some bright spots in that game, I think you can make the argument that Chartouni's play was one of those bright spots. He played well defensively against St. John's, D'ing up Shamori at times and other players, but he also seemed to maybe finally put a few nice things together on offense, limited his turnovers. Did you see Chartouni as one of the bright spots in the St. John's game, and do you think he can carry it over into future games?
I think in terms of context and relative to season performance, he might have been the brightest spot in the St. John's game that we could have seen.
That's it. That relative to season performance is an important line.
Right, exactly. I think if you look at the whole team in gross, obviously not. But yes, relative to season performance, Chartouni was incredible. His defense was formidable, or it was at least serviceable, which is good for us.
Yep.
On the year, that might not be fair to the team, but it was very good. And he was playing well offensively and really showing flashes of promise. I think that's hugely important. I think this becomes even more important when you talk about a guy like Phil Booth. I think you might be leading into this, Mike, but Chartouni is 6'3", 200 pounds. Phil Booth, and you don't have to go pound for pound with guys, but Phil Booth, 6'3", 194. He presents the defensive skill, the experience, upperclassman experience to go toe-to-toe with a guy like Phil Booth. If Chartouni can play nearly as well as he did in that past game, I think even on spells, he can help against Phil Booth and really step in and alternate with a guy like Sakar. Mm-hmm. And hopefully help shut Phil Booth down. I think it's hugely promising. He could be the key to our march, which is strange and awesome, and I love it.
I can't believe you're saying that. That'd be crazy. That'd be crazy. Right. But it's a good point, because if you look at the success of this Marquette team up until this point, and consider the lack of contributions that Chartouni has made,
right? That's what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. It stands to reason that if he can up his game, what level does it take us to? I'd also throw in there Chartouni could effectively guard Gillespie. Colin Gillespie, a 6'3", typically plays in their 2 spot. He's not your, you want to think of like a Ryan Arcidiacono.
Diacono. Yeah, nailed it. We got to
spell it out.
Nailed it.
Gillespie is not of that caliber, but he is in that mold. That said, he is someone that Chartouni can lock up. Gillespie can get his points. He went off. He had a big game within the past week and went off for 25 plus. That's not what he typically does, but he is someone that you can't just leave wide open. So, Eric, clearly Villanova is coming in with a lot of talent. This is not the Villanova team of past. They still got their head coach, but this is going to be hopefully we see a Marquette team that removes their head from their ass after this St. John's loss, gets their head back in the game, and really shows up on the court defensively, offensively. We know the crowd's going to be great, right? I think there's going to be some special food and drink deal, or maybe that was the other day. I don't know, but we know the crowd's going to be great. It's National Marquette Day.
Yeah, no question. Hopefully we remove our heart from our ass too, and really figure out how to come full force. I think we will. I think this is the game that whether consciously or subconsciously we were sort of looking to and looking past St. John's. I know we talked about it. I know we decided that probably wasn't a trap game, but still, I think we're going to be ready for this. I think we're going to be angry after. Yeah. Taco Tuesday at Fiserv Forum. I believe those are the food deals you were talking about.
Yep.
But I think we're going to be strong, angry. We're going to be fired up for National Marquette Day. I mean, Nova has great ball movement, great shooting, great veteran presence. Shooting guard who's now a finalist for the Jerry West Award in Phil Booth. We can go toe to toe for the first time in years, and don't come at me on Twitter with we took them down a few years ago when they were number one. We obviously did. That was an unbelievable game.
But Kate Reinhardt ain't walking through that door, baby.
Okay, that's right. Amen, Michael. Amen, Mike. We are a different team. We're strong. We're well poised. We're well coached. We're strong mentally. I think we come back and win this game. I really do.
I sure as hell hope you're right. I think I agree with everything you said. The one thing I still need to see is Villanova still has that swag of a program that has won 2 national championships in the last 3 years, even though they don't have the same caliber of players. Villanova, you think Marquette has played in games against Creighton on the road, against others where there's been punches thrown?
Yeah.
Villanova is going to throw haymakers down the stretch of this game. That's what they do. That's what they're good at. Marquette's going to have to respond. That's how you're going to have to beat a team, even at home, like Villanova. Are they up to the challenge on a good night? Absolutely. What team shows up? That's why we watch the games, right, Eric?
Yeah, I know the audience can't see me, but I'm violently nodding my head here on the chat. Violently nodding my head.
Yeah.
Yes. I think we talked about the Butler game at Hinkle as a reputation maker, not breaker. I think you compound a Butler game. You forget about this St. John's loss with if a potential win, at Fiserv against Nova. That is a pure March reputation maker. Mm-hmm. We need it. We really, really need it. Let's fucking get it done, guys.
One last thing before we wrap here. Any junk drawer items?
So I was digging through the junk drawer hard.
Oh, no.
And I couldn't find much. I couldn't find much in the junk drawer. I know. Wait, so I did want to give a shout out to one Marquette Twitter sphere dude named Mitch Siskey. I thought he very accurately summarized what happened in the game against St. John's. Just a real shout out to a dude who we have no idea whether he listens to the Real Chili Pod or not.
He follows us on Twitter, so he may listen.
Well, shout out Mitch. Mitch said the Hausers were 3 of 14 from 3, and Marcus was 1 of 9 on 2-pointers. Someone had the lead and just lost to a good team. They are fine. If Chartouni can replicate yesterday's performance, watch out. So a little bit of junk drawer, a little bit of shout out. Mitch Siskey, couldn't agree more with you. I think you had just about the best summation of the St. John's performance out there.
There you go. Real Chili Podcast, taking advice from Twitter. But I agree. It is a good summary. Folks, that's going to do it for us here on the Real Chili Podcast. Eric, this marks the first time ever that you and I have done solo. You and I have done 2 consecutive pods. So congratulations to us. We got through it.
Back to back.
Back to back. All right, folks. Signing off for Eric Pond. Signing off for everyone here at the Real Chili Podcast. I hope we're coming to you on Saturday night, or more likely Sunday morning, with a celebratory pod, but we're just going to have to wait and see. I'm your host, Mike Lavender. Thanks as always for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time on the Real Chili Podcast.